Your morning ritual just picked up a new variable. It's no longer just coffee, headlines, and production schedules. It's coffee, headlines, and a war in Iran that reaches all the way into your plants, your dealers, and your balance sheet.
This is Auto Intelligence produced by Autoagentic. We're not an AI hype show. We're here to track how real geopolitical shocks collide with automotive operations, intelligent systems, and the decisions leaders have to make next week, not next decade.
I'm Steve.
I'm Claire. We're part of the Autoagentic team, where the focus isn't which AI tool did you try, it's what intelligence architecture are you actually running.
New episodes every Tuesday. So whether you're starting your day with an espresso in the tower or sipping tea on the service lane before the doors open, thanks for making auto intelligence part of your routine. The audience keeps growing, and we don't take that for granted.
Today we're unpacking how the war in Iran is already reshaping energy prices, supply chains, and demand patterns, and why a narrow strip of water called the Strait of Hormuz suddenly sits in the middle of your automotive strategy.
This isn't about politics. It's about operations, capital, and the shift from pilot AI experiments to real coordinated intelligence in an industry that just stepped into another permacrisis moment. Before we talk about exposure models, fuel curves, or dealer demand, we need to anchor ourselves in facts. Because if you don't understand the starting conditions, you can't model the shock.
On the morning of Saturday, February 28th, the United States and Israel launched coordinated strikes on Iran under Operation Epic Fury. Reports from defense and trade press indicate that Iran's supreme leader and several senior security officials were killed in those strikes.
Within hours, Iran's Revolutionary Guard began broadcasting that passage through the Strait of Hormuz was not allowed. Vessel tracking showed traffic dropping by roughly 70%. Major carriers paused or rerouted vessels.
Iran then launched missile strikes at Israel and at Gulf states hosting US bases: Kuwait, the Emirates, Bahrain, Oman. Israel responded not only with conventional force, but with a major cyber operation that drove Iran's internet connectivity down to roughly 4% of normal traffic.
We're recording this on day 3. Oil markets reacted immediately. Brent crude jumped roughly 10%. The risk premium on oil effectively doubled.
And that's where this stops being foreign policy and starts being your fuel bill, your freight bill, and your transaction price on the lot. There's one geographic choke point that turns this from a regional war into a global industrial event.
The Strait of Hormuz sounds abstract, a thin strip of water between Iran and Oman. But every day, roughly 14 to 15 million barrels of crude move through that corridor, about 20% of the world's oil supply.
Automotive manufacturing solutions put it bluntly. The connection between that waterway and an assembly plant in Nagoya or Sunderland may seem abstract. It is not. It is one of the most important physical constraints on the industrial economy.
Alternate pipelines can only offset a fraction of Hormuz capacity. A sustained closure could remove 8 to 10 million barrels per day from global supply in the short term.
And it's not just crude. Liquefied natural gas shipments move through those same lanes. European gas prices have already jumped sharply since the escalation.
If you're running automotive, the Strait of Hormuz just moved from distant geography to a live dependency inside your cost structure. That choke point moves oil, and oil moves everything else.
Before the strikes, Brent crude hovered near $70 per barrel. It jumped into the high 70s almost immediately.
Analysts are now modeling scenarios that push oil toward $100, potentially higher if disruption persists. The risk premium jumped from roughly $7 to around $18 in a matter of days.
US gasoline had fallen to around $2.85 per gallon in February. It just crossed $3 again. The rule of thumb still holds. Every $5 move in crude adds roughly 12 cents per gallon at the pump.
In more extreme scenarios, prolonged conflict, sustained shipping risk, crude could climb into the $130 to $140 range. That could push U.S. gasoline north of $6 per gallon.
For Canadian listeners, $90 crude translates into roughly 14 cents per litre more at the pump, with steeper increases if oil tests triple digits. Fuel is the first visible shock, but it's not the only one.
Energy prices are one layer. The physics of moving containers is another. Ports in the Gulf have been disrupted. Some suspended operations. Container lines have paused bookings or rerouted vessels around the Cape of Good Hope, adding weeks to transit times and significantly increasing fuel burn.
When transit periods extend by weeks, the just-in-time model begins to strain. Raw materials miss slots, components arrive late, buffer stocks already thin evaporate quickly.
Assembly plants could begin feeling delayed component impacts within 2 to 3 weeks if disruption holds. Freight surcharges rise, lead times extend, inventory planning becomes more complex precisely when finance teams want lean balance sheets. But the deeper impact sits inside the vehicle itself.
Energy is embedded in every unit you build. Steel, aluminum, paint shops, machining centres, all energy intensive. Higher oil and gas ripple through electricity pricing and industrial inputs.
Iran is also a major petrochemical supplier. Methanol, ammonia, polymers, these show up as plastics, adhesives, foams, and specialty components inside every vehicle. If petrochemical feedstocks rise 15 to 25%, manufacturers building hundreds of thousands of units are staring at tens of millions in incremental cost before labor or capital adjustments even enter the equation.
This is the perma-crisis layer: higher energy, higher logistics, margin compression, tighter capital. Markets don't price structure, they price companies.
Ford, GM, and Stellantis are all watching closely. Direct sales exposure to Iran is minimal. The real risk is indirect: sustained oil shock. Stellantis is often cited as most exposed due to its North American mix of high-consumption vehicles. Ford faces similar pressure with trucks and performance models. GM may be relatively better positioned given its broader EV portfolio.
Equity markets have already repriced risk, not catastrophic, but noticeable. And this is where the conversation shifts from who's exposed to who's prepared.
You're listening to Auto Intelligence, produced by Auto Agentic. For years, the industry layered AI tools onto workflows. Pilots launched, dashboards multiplied, coordination problems remained. 2026 is the pivot year.
The shift is from which model are we using to how is intelligence wired into procurement, logistics, demand planning, and dealership execution. Auto-agentic coordinates specialized automotive agents inside a shared enterprise architecture, because when a choke point moves fuel prices globally, you don't need more tools, you need coherence. Now let's apply that lens to electric vehicles.
It's easy to say higher gasoline pushes EV demand up. Directionally, that's true.
But EV supply chains are energy intensive. Mining, refining, smelting, shipping, all exposed to rising fuel costs and freight volatility. Battery manufacturing remains geographically concentrated. Upstream material flows are still dependent on global shipping routes.
So the paradox is sharp. Electrification becomes more attractive to consumers while simultaneously becoming more expensive to execute. This is where intelligence architecture matters. Seeing how energy shocks propagate across mineral sourcing, plant schedules, dealer allocations, and total cost of ownership models in one coordinated system.
Consumers buy vehicles inside an economy. Every $10 increase in crude tends to lift inflation modestly. Rate cut expectations weaken.
Vehicles are already significantly more expensive than pre-pandemic. Payments have climbed sharply for younger buyers. Higher fuel plus tighter credit conditions adds real friction to demand.
On the commercial side, diesel represents a major operating cost for carriers. Sustained increases push freight surcharges higher. Smaller operators feel it first.
Automotive logistics can no longer be treated as a black box. Visibility into carrier health and diesel exposure becomes essential. And modern conflict doesn't just move through oceans, it moves digitally.
Cyber activity often rises in asymmetric conflict environments. Infrastructure and supply networks become targets.
We've already seen offensive cyber operations disrupt connectivity dramatically. Software-defined vehicles and connected factories sit inside that blast radius. History shows oil shocks accelerate structural change.
1973 reshaped fuel efficiency and consumer preference almost overnight. Today's structural accelerants are electrification, supply chain regionalization, and intelligence architecture.
The question is whether your organization accelerates with the shift or absorbs the shock blindly. Operational checklists matter. Map petrochemical exposure, model extended routing, review cyber posture, scenario plan, demand mix.
But those answers often live in disconnected systems. An intelligence architecture approach asks a harder question. Can you see how a 70% drop in Hormuz traffic changes energy costs, supplier reliability, freight exposure, EV demand curves, and credit approvals inside one coordinated system?
That's the shift from AI as a tool to AI as an operating layer. Permanent shocks require coordinated responses, not fragmented reactions.
A conflict thousands of kilometers away has lifted crude prices, pushed gasoline higher, choked a corridor carrying 20% of global oil, disrupted ports, stressed inventories, raised petrochemical costs, and added pressure to affordability.
It has also cracked open assumptions about cheap energy, reliable logistics, and pilot AI being enough. The question isn't whether more shocks are coming. It's whether you've built an intelligence architecture capable of absorbing them.
For dealers, that means preparing for demand shifts while managing rising operating costs. For OEMs, it means resequencing capital and confronting coordination gaps.
For the industry as a whole, it means recognizing that geopolitics is now a standing constraint. This episode was produced by Automotive, building the intelligence foundation automotive organizations will rely on over the next decade. Learn more at autoagentic.ai.
If you have a story from the front lines or a topic we should unpack, email Barry, founder and producer of Auto Intelligence and co-founder and CEO of Automotive, at barry@autoagentic.ai.
New episodes every Tuesday. Stay curious, stay coordinated. And remember, the architecture you build this year determines how you navigate whatever comes after Hormuz.
Thanks for listening.